What's up, everybody? Welcome to this new look, new format. This is mostly driven by the weather, all the rain that we've been having. But yeah, I thought since I can't really get out there and actually go for a ride on it, what better time than now to sit down and talk about how I'm feeling about the Forbidden Druid. I've got about 350 miles on it now, and that's 100% trail mileage because I'm not riding it even to and from Bradbury anymore. So it's 350 miles all on the trails, all kinds of stuff at this point, from the bike park to Carabasset Valley kind of enduro-y type stuff to cross country. I really have done everything. Obviously the big thing, the talking point, the special thing about the Forbidden Druid is the high pivot, right? Is it for real? Is it ruining my climbs? Is it all this stuff that people say? And I don't know, some of you may have seen, there was even that article on Pink Bike that was like trying to scientifically assess like how much drag is the high pivot setup adding, and, you know, linking it up to this thing and measuring it's like 2 to 5%. You're losing your efficiency based on the system. You know, I don't want to comment specifically on their testing methodology or anything like that. I guess what I'd say on that is this: in the real world, there are really only two things that matter in terms of pedaling efficiency when going uphill. How long is it going to take me to get to the top? And how terrible is that going to be, right? How much am I going to hate my life? And the answer on the Druid is you're going to get to the top pretty damn fast, and you're not going to hate your life at all. I will say, like, subjectively, it feels like it climbs better to me than my previous bike, which was the YT Jeffsy. I would say it feels like it climbs similarly or perhaps even a little better to the Ripmo when I had that. It just sticks to the ground through the technical stuff on climbs, which is great. It just feels so good. In terms of like the loss of efficiency caused by the high pivot or whatever, I haven't noticed it at all. I have destroyed all of my climbing PRs on this bike. I destroyed many of my climbing PRs at Bradbury literally the first time I took it to Bradbury, just by accident. I wasn't trying to break them. I was just pedaling up stuff and just naturally doing it that much faster because the Druid is good and the high pivot system, yeah, it works really well. So, you know, your mileage may vary, and, you know, insert whatever scientific stuff you want to insert here. But for me personally, in real world situations, I haven't found any efficiency loss whatsoever with the high pivot. It doesn't change the way pedaling a bike feels to me at all. If anything, the Druid feels more efficient to me pedaling than the Jeffsy did. I don't think the high pivot is making it feel more efficient either. I think that's got to do with other stuff like the suspension system and some of the other parts, the hub being nicer, things like that. But it definitely is not costing me anything in terms of efficiency. And then descending, obviously, which is what the high pivot system is kind of designed for a little bit, it feels great there too, and it really does the things that I was hoping it would do. So just kind of a quick primer for folks who may not know about the high pivot design, and I'm not an expert in it either, but the basic idea of it essentially is, let's set up a suspension system where the wheel moves backwards when it hits something rather than just moving up. I mean, it moves up and backwards, but it's got that backward motion. So kind of like if someone's throwing you a baseball, you know, as you catch it, you're kind of absorbing that impact backwards. It's not just flat on like that, right? The fundamentals behind the high pivot design are kind of similar to that. Scientists, go ahead and disagree with me in the comments. I'm probably wrong. I'm not a physicist. But anyway, so the reason that I got a high pivot bike partially is just because I love how the Druid looks, but partially is because I felt like this is going to be great for carrying speed through that sort of like really rooty impacts where you're just hitting stuff that's just slowing you down. And every root you hit, you can feel it sucking your speed away. I'm talking about Bradbury Mountain State Park, just because that's like my local place where I'm riding a lot. Of course, there are lots of other trails like that in Maine. The high pivot system works. It does what I wanted it to do, in that I'm able to carry more speed through those sections. And there's an interesting kind of thing that happens sometimes where you almost even feel like you're accelerating. You know, if it's downhill a little bit, but it's chunky. In some of these sections where with the Jeffsy, I would just feel my speed is just getting sucked away every time I hit, you know, the next thing. There are spots on the trails where the Druid almost feels like it's accelerating. Like I'm not pedaling, but it's just going, as it hits things, it's going faster and faster. Another thing about the high pivot system I think is worth mentioning is just how planted it makes the bike feel, because when the suspension compresses, the bike actually elongates. And so especially in some certain situations, that it just feels amazing. Like going into like a big, you know, nice downhill berm where if you pump down into the berm at the right time, like the bike just gets longer and it just shoots through. Like, oh my God, it's very hard to describe, but it feels so good. It's just like so satisfying. And in some of those chunky sections too, you can kind of just feel it sort of hunkered down, and it's great. So the bike does feel like it's really planted. One of the criticisms that I've heard of it is that it's difficult to get into the air. I haven't really found that to be the case. Like, I'm not that good at bunny hopping, but it didn't really take me very long to figure out how to bunny hop it. I think it does take a little bit of adjustment just because the suspension works and feels a little bit different. But I would say if you're considering this bike, forget about that as like a reason to not buy it, because I'm bad, and I was able to bunny hop it at the same level I could bunny hop my previous bike after like 15 minutes out in the yard. So like it probably is a little bit different, takes a little mental adjustment, but we're talking about a day. We're not talking about like, 6 months. If you can bunny hop on whatever bike you're riding now, you can bunny hop a Druid. Not that hard. Another criticism you see leveled at the high pivot is just that it's extra maintenance, extra wear. That is kind of true, although kind of not. Like I said, I've got 350 miles on that, so that's a good amount, but it's not a ton. Obviously, I haven't had to replace anything yet or anything like that. The only thing I've noticed so far is that I have needed to clean the drivetrain more often than I would have on the previous bike, just to keep it quiet. If I was less picky about bike noises, I probably wouldn't even need to clean it any differently, but it does, you start to hear the idler, and it's actually more the lower chain guide that the Druid has than the idler, but you start to hear that more and more the dirtier it gets. So that's something I've been doing a little bit more, cleaning the drivetrain with this bike than I did with my previous bike. Honestly, that's probably a good thing. It'll keep the drivetrain in better shape for longer than like letting all that dirt grind in there. But that is just a thing to be aware of, is if you want to keep it nice and quiet, it does take a little bit more cleaning than a regular bike. And then obviously there's a little bit more complexity there when it does come time to replace something or do some other kind of regular maintenance. So the high pivot system specifically, I think it's great. Honestly, my only gripe about it really is that the chain guide that's over the idler is an E13 thing that they made specifically for the Druid. It's like pretty big, and it's kind of easy to catch a shoelace on there if your shoelaces aren't tucked in. So if I forget to do that, I sometimes accidentally kind of like pull it up and rip it off a little bit, and it's just kind of annoying. So easy problem to solve by either tucking your shoelaces in, or I think some folks have also 3D printed chain guides that you can just put in there that are a little bit lower profile than the E13 one that it comes with. Not a big problem, just a little gripe that I have about it. All right, so let's stop talking about high pivot and let's just talk about the bike generally. And again, I think the bike generally is great. It's kind of perfect. It's kind of exactly what I wanted it to be, and that it is a trail bike. It's not an enduro bike, but it's a trail bike that can handle some enduro-y stuff. I took it to Carrabassett Valley, and as you saw in the video, I had a great time there, even on the black trails. So that's like, that's pretty chunky, pretty enduro-y type terrain. Druid is able to handle it. I'm not going to say it handles it the same way that a bike that's like, 170 would handle it. The Druid is 150, 135 in terms of that's suspension travel front and rear. So obviously there is a difference. They say high pivot witchcraft. It's a little bit magic. It's not that magic. It doesn't make 135 millimeters of travel in the rear feel like 170. But it's good enough to handle pretty much everything that you can throw at it, at least here in Maine, everything that I've thrown at it thus far. And that sort of trail-focused geometry is fine for those kind of enduro trails, and then it's fantastic for all of the just sort of more regular trails that we have around us, right? I can take it over to Blackstrap and do the flowy stuff, and it's great over there. I can do Raven, that's good too. I can do anything at Bradbury, and it's great. Cruises through the routes. I can take it over to Tops and Ponds, where it's like flat cross country, and just like, just put the hammer down pedaling and like have a lot of fun doing that too. So the geometry is kind of in that perfect space for like, it's ready to get rowdy when you want to, but it's also fun for just pedaling around on a completely flat trail where there's not going to be any downhills. You can still have fun on this bike. So that's pretty awesome. Long story short, just talking about the bike generally, it's fun to ride uphill. It's fun to ride on the flats. It's fun to ride downhill. It's just straight up fun to ride. On the gnarliest, chunkiest stuff, you can start to feel kind of like banged around a little bit, or at least I've had that feeling. Now that said, I do want to caveat that with, I set my suspension to the recommended sort of factory settings, and I have literally touched nothing. I haven't tried to tune it at all. I know it's terrible. I really need to do that. The problem is I just want to go out and ride and have fun. And it's fun to ride as it is. So I haven't taken that time to like go down the same hill 10 times and, you know, tweak the knobs and try to get it perfected. So, on some of the gnarlier stuff, I do start to feel like I'm getting shaken a little bit sometimes, but it's very possible that that's just because I still haven't really dialed in my suspension. I don't think that's a criticism of the bike anyway. Again, it's a trail bike. It's not completely magic. It's not going to feel like a downhill bike when you're going over that big gnarly stuff. So my only gripe about it really, and this is something that's very easy to fix, but it does have that kind of like spot in the back that rocks can get into and then they can get crushed and presumably break the frame. So there are third-party things that you can buy to fill that in. Forbidden actually just released a larger fender that comes also with some moto foam to fit in there, and that's being given away for free to anybody who has a Druid. So I think going forward, we can probably consider that problem just completely resolved. I'll have to see. I haven't gotten mine yet, but I'm pretty excited to see. At the moment, I have a Jank Components one in there that's working great. So it isn't a problem. It's just a little bit annoying on like a bike this expensive, especially that you have to deal with that issue yourself. And so now Forbidden has probably addressed that. We'll see when I actually get the new thing. But if there is like a minor complaint I'd kind of make about the frame, it would be that. Actually, I guess there's one other complaint that I would make about the frame, which is just that it's carbon fiber, which is fine. I guess I don't mind that, but I do wish that they offered an aluminum option, both for price reasons and for environmental reasons. I wish more companies that like made sick bikes also made aluminum framed versions of them. Obviously, an aluminum bike with a high pivot suspension is going to be like fairly heavy. The Druid that I have, which is carbon, is 35 pounds with all the stuff that I got on it. So you'd assume an aluminum version of that's going to be more like probably 37, 38, somewhere in there, which is getting pretty heavy. But I still wish that they would offer that again for environmental reasons, for cost reasons. If they had an aluminum version, I would have bought that. So I would be stoked if they would do that. Bike manufacturers out there, make aluminum versions of your bikes. Consider it, aluminum bikes. So overall, obviously, I really love this bike. It's kind of been exactly what I was hoping it would be so far. Obviously, I've only got 350 miles on it, so we'll come back and we'll talk about it again later at probably like 500 or 600 miles, again after 1,000 maybe. But yeah, for now, I really have nothing substantial that's bad to say about the bike at all. I do want to talk about a couple of the specific parts that I chose to put on it too. They have nothing to do with the Druid really, because you could put them on any bike, and I didn't buy one of the like stock kits of the Druid. So this isn't Druid specific, but just a few things to note. So first of all, the brakes, I put Code RSC brakes on it, 200 millimeter rotors front and rear, and I love it. I love it a lot. You could argue that's overkill for a trail bike. You don't really need that much stopping power, but I really like being able to stop and not having to worry about that, not having any issues with fading. Obviously, you know, it's Maine. We don't have like downhill trails that take 20 minutes to get down. So maybe I would if I was going down longer trails, but we don't have them. So I've had no issues with brake fade, nothing like that. My only complaint about them, which is a complaint that you could launch this at any SRAM brake model, is that they get loud. It doesn't take too much to get in there, to get on there, and you start hearing them as you're going down the mountain, particularly if they're wet. No brakes are like totally immune to that. It does seem like SRAMs are like kind of worse than other options, but personally, I prefer the kind of like modulated brake pull feel that SRAM has. I prefer that over the Shimano kind of like on-off feel. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched. I'm pretty stoked on the Code RSCs. I think that's a good place to put some money to upgrade a bike. I would say it's really nice to have that braking power and have that confidence, and also have the ability to like modulate, knowing that you've got that power in your back pocket if you really need to just like stop. Another thing, the DT Swiss 350 hub with the Star Ratchet upgrade, totally worth it in my opinion. Honestly, one of the things about this bike that makes it feel so much better than the Jeffsy is just having that nicer hub with a faster engagement in the back. It makes the wheel feel smoother. It makes uphill tech stuff easier just because you can ratchet much more effectively. Yeah, it's great. Everybody says this about having sort of like a higher engagement hub, but yeah, it's real tough to go back. It's tough to go back once you've experienced that. And obviously there are much higher engagement hubs than even what I have on this. So at some point, maybe I'll switch to something even higher engagement and not even be able to go back to this. But I would say that's an upgrade that I think it's like $85 or something to buy like the 350, but then buy the upgrade kit, or maybe it might even be less than that. Worth it. Do it. Go for it. Absolutely recommended. Tires on this, I've got the Assegai up front and the DHR2 in the rear. That tire combination works really well for me. I love it. I think you don't necessarily need that much grip, particularly on a trail bike. I'm sure I could get away with less, but I don't want to. And it doesn't feel like it's slowing me down. Maybe it would if I'd spent more time on faster rolling tires, but I haven't. I'm still destroying my PRs, even with those tires. So I think that's a great combo. I would recommend that if you're looking for something that can kind of bridge that sort of trail enduro gap and you're not super worried about going as fast as possible when you're pedaling, you're more worried about grip. Yeah, I like the Assegai up front and then the DHR2 in the back. So yeah, I don't know if I really have much more to say about it than what I've said already. So I guess just to kind of review the high pivot system, I think it does exactly what they say it's supposed to do. At least it does all the things that I was hoping that it would do. It helps me carry more speed through the chunk. It seems to help me climb better than the horse link sort of setup did that I had on the Jeffsy. And I don't feel like I'm losing anything in terms of efficiency. Certainly if you look at my PRs, I've destroyed all of my climbing PRs since I got the Druid. So they're pretty much all, any trail that I climb that I've been on like more than once, or that I've been on since I got the Druid, my climbing PR for that trail is probably on the Druid. So yeah, I don't want to come out and say that that pink bike article is wrong or unscientific or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, for me in the real world, and I would guess for you in the real world too, that like 2% loss in efficiency isn't a real thing that actually is going to manifest itself, one, in any way that you can feel, and two, honestly, in any way that you can measure outside of like some complicated lab setup like that. Like when you're out on the trail, you're pedaling up, it's going to feel fine. If you're pedaling up fire roads a lot, that's going to feel fine. If you're pedaling up an actual trail, that's going to feel fine too. I've done plenty of both of those on this bike. More trails, to be fair, than fire roads, but there's a good amount of double track stuff that's kind of like fire roads around here that you got to pedal up. And the Druid works fine on all of them. My only complaints are just little nitpicks, like I wish they had an aluminum frame version. I wish that they had resolved that kind of like little rock crush area, although I think they probably have with this new fender that they're sending out now, the winter fender, I think it's called. And yeah, my only complaint other than that would be the price and the fact that it's difficult to find. Now, every bike is difficult to find, but the closest Forbidden Druid, or the closest Forbidden dealer to Maine, there's one in Quebec, or if you want to stay in the US, there's one in Colorado. That's literally the closest dealer to us is in Colorado. That's in the same country as we are here in Maine. So I do wish that they were a little bit more accessible, and I certainly wish they were more accessible price-wise because, let's be real, that they're expensive AF. But that said, if you've got the money for it and you're in the market for a trail bike that can do some enduro-y stuff, that can be still kind of fun in an XC kind of context too, I think it's particularly good if you're in a situation like me where your local trails that you're riding all the time are like really rooty and you just feel like that speed is getting sucked away. Even when you're riding downhill, the speed is just getting sucked away. The Druid, I think, has made that feel a lot better, at least on those downhill sections. If you're pedaling over it, roots are roots, you're going to feel that. But in the downhill stuff, it really does feel sometimes like it's just magic. I don't know how it works exactly, but it's great. I have no complaints about it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Druid thus far, but obviously I'm going to keep riding it, and I'll keep you all filled in if anything that I think about it changes as I put more miles into it. And if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them if I can, or try to point you to some useful resources if I can't. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to do in this video is just kind of address the future of this channel. I have typically been posting bike videos every week. I am probably not going to continue doing that, at least through this winter, because I don't have enough stuff kind of like stored up to get me through the winter with regular mountain biking, and I'm going to be out fat biking, but I just don't think those videos are that interesting or exciting. So I probably will put together a couple different fat biking videos to kind of maybe showcase some of the trail systems that I haven't in the past. But I'm not going to be doing a fat biking video every week, and I don't have extra mountain biking videos to really kind of fill in those gaps. So I am not going to be posting every week over the course of the winter, and then hopefully I'll be able to get back into that rhythm next spring when kind of things warm up and the season starts again. So anyway, we'll leave it at that for today. I hope you get a chance to get outside and ride, and I'll see you next week, or possibly not. I'll see you the next time I have something valuable that I want to share with you. Hopefully it'll be next week. If it will friggin' stop raining, if it'll stop raining for 10 goddamn seconds and let things dry out, then I'll see you next week, because there's a bunch of places that I still want to get before the snow comes in. But it is so wet. We just can't ride anything right now. It's ridiculous.